What up, Liam? What up? What up?
Howdy.
How,
So welcome to episode 3, I guess.
can you believe we've already? This is our. I was telling my group of students today that you and I have done this podcast together, and we're on episode 3. Um, it's amazing how time flies. And for those of you watching, you're watching Office Hours with Jay and L, Jamal and Liam. What up, peeps? You can catch us on YouTube, Apple for audio, Spotify, and Podbean. And last week we had a great discussion. Liam shared a little bit of a foundation around capitalism. We're going to continue that episode later on in the future. And this week's topic is about resume writing. And I think what's important here, Liam, for us to do is talk about not only how to write a resume, but the impact of putting together an effective resume, building connections through various platforms, especially LinkedIn, because to a certain extent, I think a lot of recruiters nowadays look at LinkedIn as a way to identify talent. And so you have to be ready at a moment's notice if you're tapped by a recruiter on LinkedIn to submit your resume for review. I recall maybe about 3, 4 weeks ago, I got a hit from a recruiter for an executive job, and she asked me if I would be willing to send my resume right away for her to her, and I had it prepared because I polish up my resume regularly, at least 3 days a week. I go in and review it. So I'm excited about that topic today, and you're gonna and I think what's
That
today's discussion,
I,
Liam, as you kick it
I gotta
off.
stop first. I gotta ask something. Like,
Yeah, go for
how
it.
do you how do you edit something like that 3 days a week? I would update my CV every, I don't know, 6 to 9 months. So
It's a great question because depending on the job I'm looking for will require me to tailor it to that job description, right?
interesting.
Uh, so if I'm looking for a director job at Verizon, Verizon may have some desired qualifications that I have to change up on my resume versus let's say I go to a financial services institution and I'm looking for a director job, they may require some desired qualifications, right? Or preferred qualifications. And so constantly I'm
Yeah, yeah.
going in and I've
Gotcha.
got to, update it and have
That's
some, in some
fascinating.
cases, multiple copies.
Yeah, I have different copies of things, but yeah, it'll be neat once. Okay, so it can come back up once you've laid your foundations.
Yeah.
It'll be fascinating to see the difference between that and a CV. What I would deal with it, in my profession, because a lot of that dealing with their preferred qualification stuff is what I would put in cover letters, and it wouldn't be in
Mm,
the rest of it all. So there's a basic, my CV is all together. I update it whenever I have a new publication or something, but beyond that, I don't
right.
have to. But everything else is done separately. So it's interesting how integrated they are in other
Hmm.
professions. So okay, I'm going to be very
Yeah,
curious
we'll
about
we'll get into it. We'll get into it because we will talk cover letters as well, um, as part of the submission to a job requisition. And so I'm going to flip it to you this time. And whenever you're ready, man, do you want me to just talk about how to lay out the foundation for resumes? But I'll flip it to you. What's on your mind?
Well, let's start with basic definitions. Let's define for people what a resume is, a cover letter is, why we need to have multiple versions of
Yeah,
it, maybe how it is different from a curriculum vitae. Like
yeah, for sure.
let's see what it is first.
I'll take a step back and talk about for those of you that have been around for a while. I remember in the '90s, it was a paper application, right? You walk into a place of employment, you want to apply for a job, you go to 5 different places and you grab applications and then you drive around and drop them off. That was the old format in terms of applying for jobs. Well, with the advent of technology, the internet, resumes, if you will, are your application put in a format that's that easily is reviewed, that goes through AI and doesn't get weeded out, that describes your qualifications, your experience, your set of experiences, gives a high level overview of the skills or competencies, and then about a 10-year period of your professional experience, education, any certifications that you may have, and that's your resume. And so it could be a one-page document, it could be a two-page document, but no more than 10 years of professional experience. And so there's always this misconception that you have to only have one page. If you can put it in a one-page document, terrific. If you need 2 pages based on your job or your role in with the particular company, by all means, that's also not a pitfall. That you can do that. And so, that is your application in today's format. You can't walk in and drop off your resume nowadays. You have to submit it online, and it has to be in the right format. And we'll talk about format as we continue the conversation. We'll also discuss what sort of submission it should be in, whether it's a Word doc, PDF. Those are all integral parts of submitting a resume, because when a recruiter has a job opening, right, and they post this job opening, whether it's on LinkedIn, Indeed.com, or any other employment platform, can you imagine the number of people that apply for these jobs, right? I remember posting a job. Yes, when I was in financial services as a senior manager, actually my boss posted a job that was similar in nature to mine, similar role. He had over 100 applicants post for the job, over 100. Now, imagine having to interview 100 applicants. And so you get weeded out by experience. And we'll talk about that also. Like, are you able to take the skills that you've learned in your prior role and transfer it into the opening? And so as a recruiter, if you're looking at all these resumes, you're taking less than 30 seconds to say good, no, good, no, good, no, boom. The trash file, or hey,
Right.
And that's at, go ahead.
Gosh, this would be where writing them well really matters, because of how quick people go at that. There's neat studies about bias, and then the use of AI too, by to weed through applications as well. There was a great study done a number of years ago in France, where they submitted identical applications with all the same experience and education and everything, but one of them was named Mohammed and one was named Pierre, and the Mohammeds didn't get calls back. So there's all kinds of like implicit bias that can filter into both AIs and people as well. But
absolutely,
even without that, you still need to find some way to catch their attention really early, because people aren't going to read the whole thing for every one of these. They're going to scan them and move along. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And here's the to take that even further. AI sometimes, before it gets to recruiter, will spit your resume out, put it in the disqualified pile, because you don't match the necessary qualifications they're looking for. So your resume really has to stand out. And if you have a cover letter, that also needs to stand out. And I think today's discussion, we'll talk about formatting, we'll talk about font, we'll talk about, the amount of bullet points you should have under each job you've had, dates, the importance of dates, education, how you write your education on a resume, the importance of having a LinkedIn URL available as well, because we talked earlier about, hey, recruiters will go find talent from LinkedIn. And so you need to be ready to have that URL, your LinkedIn URL at the top. And you want to be active on LinkedIn. You don't just want to have a LinkedIn profile and not be active if you're actively looking for a job, right? And I always suggest at least 1 to 2 posts that are relevant to the set of experiences you have on LinkedIn to attract an audience. It's kind of like TikTok. You have to have this algorithm that's constantly, moving your posts along on LinkedIn. So we'll talk about that as well. Really, really important. And then the format that's used today, and we'll talk about that. And I'll share some resources people can leverage to get their resume graded. A free resource. There's a ton of them out there. The one I like to use, we'll talk about that as well. So we can get started in terms of formatting, unless you have other questions. Let's dive in.
I like that you noted that they don't have to just be one page, because a lot of people have heard that you need to catch people's attention very, very quickly. So they think that they need to keep it super, super short. But it may be that formatting is more important here to catch their attention early on. And if it's worthwhile, then more information makes sense. Yeah.
Totally, totally. So let's get started. And I think where I want to kick us off here is just talk about font. You know, the rule of thumb had been in the past, you use Times Roman, and fonts should be different. Standard font should be Calibri. So for those of you listening and wondering, what font should I use when I type out my resume? Calibri is the right font that you should use. And your name should be in bold at the top, right? When we look at the name, it should be in bold at 15 font size. 15 font size, right? 15 font size. And then underneath that is the following. So I'm going to pull up a resume here. Go ahead, Liam.
Is Calibri a common font then?
It is. It's most common. It's most common today.
I don't have it, so
yeah, it's funny because I submitted my resume to a professional to rewrite it for me, and they went with Calibri and various font sizes to start with. And so if I go to the name portion, that's 15 size font, right? That is my name at the top. That's the first thing that should be represented. The next line, for those of you listening and are curious, what should the next line be? And in the past, I used to make the mistake of putting my entire address, and you don't need to do that. So right underneath, and not a lot of spacing in between, a single line spacing, is your city, state, and zip code. That's the next line, city, state, and zip code, right? Right next to that is your phone number. Your phone number. Then your email address. And then your LinkedIn URL. Your LinkedIn URL. A hyperlink that people should be able to go click on and go to your LinkedIn to see that there's some sort of parallels between your resume experience and your LinkedIn experience, right? Now, are all recruiters going to do that? Maybe, maybe not. But if a recruiter taps you through LinkedIn and says, hey, your qualifications match our job description, can you send me your resume? And then they look at your resume and there's some disparity there, it might raise some questions. So just be cognizant of making sure that an updated resume matches an updated LinkedIn, right? Especially if they find you through LinkedIn. So again, line 1, your name. And be cognizant of having too much white on your document. Second line, your city and state, phone number, email address, and LinkedIn URL. All right. Now, this is where people miss out on in terms of summary. Some people will say, well, I don't review the summary. Some people will say they review the summary. But this is what's going to catch the recruiter's attention, right? The summary is about 2 to 3 sentences describing your leadership, what you've done, and some quantifiable numbers. So let's read one as an example. This is what one of my resume writers did for me. And so I'll read this. So an accomplished leader with comprehensive experience in financial services, exceptional leadership, strategic planning, and financial management capabilities that have been consistently demonstrated. Expertise encompasses a wide range of banking operations, including retail banking, home mortgage lending, risk management, and regulatory compliance. With a proven track record of driving profitability, enhancing operational efficiencies, and leading successful teams, effective contributions to growth and success of current and past employers by achieving over 80% in net promoter scores, 100% pass rate on all audits, a 10% increase in investments, and 60% in loan growth. That is the summary that is written to, wow, this person's got all these skills which are transferable depending on the job I'm applying for, right, within banking. We also see that there are quantifiable numbers in there that define, based on what this person just shared, this is what's been achieved, right? So that's your summary. Right above that, right above the summary, should be the job you're applying for. So let's just, for example, say President of Health Club Sales Operations. In bold, 10.5, right beneath it is your summary. And so you got your name, your second line with your address, phone number, email, LinkedIn URL, job you're applying for, and that 2 to 3 sentences of a summary of who you are and what your experiences entail. That is the first part of your resume. Then we'll get into the skills. But let me pause to see if you have any questions there, Liam, before I move on.
Yeah, so far that's actually pretty similar to the structure for most CVs. You start off with just the basic information at the top, you know, contact information. We don't use like LinkedIn usually. I mean, it's getting to be a bit more common, but it's still not, you know, generally pushed. But yeah, the contact information, then there's a summary at the top, you know, like basically who you are, what your areas of experience are. So yeah, that's so far very similar.
Very cool. And then you dive into your skills. Now, your skills are a combination of soft skills and hard skills, right? Your soft skills are typically your interpersonal skills, your communication skills, your management skills, your sales management skills. Those are your soft skills. Think hard skills. You think about managing various platforms. Some of those platforms could be, an example is Microsoft 365, right? That's a hard skill. Mm-hmm. Let's say you're a technical writer, right? You've written technical information for the various platforms. Let's say you've managed an HR system that today's called Workday, which manages a lot of the HR aspects of employees. Or you've managed Concur, which is an expense platform. Or you've managed Salesforce. So Salesforce today is a platform used for various tools within different industries. It could be used for telemarketing. It could be used for customer relationship review. So those are hard skills, right? And so it's got to be a combination of both. You're not always going to have a 50-50 split on hard and soft skills depending on your role. And so when you go through the tool that I share with you later to grade your resume, you might not always get 100% on your resume simply because the split between soft and hard skills is not going to be 50-50. And so we'll talk about that. So your next one is skills. Then you define your skills and what they look like. I'll give you a set of skills that I have written here. First one is Microsoft 365, which includes Word, PowerPoint, and Excel. Then I have recruiting and hiring, regulatory compliance, effective P&L management, so profit and loss management, HR management, just a few of the skills that I've gained over the years. And I have roughly here about 12 to 13 skills written down because in the various roles that I've been involved in, I've been able to learn these skills and consistently use them in various roles, like budgeting and planning. So I have to forecast a certain budget based on hours allocated, and I couldn't exceed that budget in terms of hours, right? So FTE, full-time equivalent. So those are some of the skills I have. So you have your skills now, and then you have what those skills are in your format. Depending, and again, you don't have to have a lot of skills indicated there. You could have 10. Anything more than that might be kind of a blur to folks because what they're going to look at is probably the first few and go from there. But if I'm applying for a job that requires all these skills and I get deeper into the interview process, then whoever's looking at that resume during a pre-screen, if you get to the pre-screen, will say, wow, you tell me about what you've done around customer retention, for example, right? You state that as a skill. What have been your experiences about customer retention? Because what might be extracted from this resume are questions during the interview process that are behavior driven, right? And so keep that in mind because when you're writing out your resume, oftentimes recruiters will say, bring your resume to life for me. Talk about what your resume is, your experiences, and you got to be able to articulate those skills and those qualifications that you've embedded within the resume.
Yeah, here's where they start to really diverge, and it makes a lot of sense. It has been so long since I've seen resumes even because, gosh, yeah, my previous work experience is in a day when we didn't do a lot of this stuff and you just filled in the applications or whatever. So
right.
I never had to do the whole like listing skills because, yeah, it doesn't fit in the same way with what I do. So yeah,
it's different.
see the distinctions between a resume and a CV as you go along. That after your introduction, the first thing you're saying is, these are the things that I know how to do. I can work with this office suite or whatever.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I've been, part of the nonprofit that I'm associated with. I've done a lot of career advising over the last month or so, and the most of the time is spent on resume writing with folks. They'll send me the resume. I've seen maybe 1 to 2 resumes that look really good, and I'm like, wow, this stuff is something I could probably emulate, right? And others, once we grade them, you can see there's some disparity, and we sit and talk through what the resume should look like, and they go back, and the folks that I'm providing career advice to do a really nice job of cleaning up their resume and coming back and saying, all right, what do you think now? And they've done a really nice job formatting it and bullet pointing it.
Speaking of formatting, and for anybody, this, before I forget at least, for anybody who doesn't have access to Microsoft's Office suite, I looked in that Calibri font that you mentioned is now preferred. Is a proprietary Microsoft font that they released in 07, and they don't include in the MS Core fonts for other platforms. So I have no legal access to it, but Google has produced a clone of it called Carlito, as in
there you go,
or whatever. So
Carlito's
if you're on Linux or something else and don't have or even if you're on Windows or Mac but don't have Microsoft Office, then you can just download the free Carlito font from Google and use that still with whatever Office suite you're using.
Great call out, Liam. So now skills. Once we've outlined our skills, we're going to talk about our professional experience. Don't go past 10 years. Now, it doesn't mean that I've got 30 years of financial services experience. I'll tell you how I formatted my resume to illustrate that I have 30 years of financial experience, because if you noticed, I didn't include that in my summary. So now we're going to get to my experience, right? We're going to say professional experience. Again, it's going to be in bold. You can center it. You don't have to cap. One thing I wanted to go back to. Oftentimes people, and this is not going to deter a recruiter from looking at your resume. You can cap your heading, like skills or professional experience, all across, or you can just cap the first letter of each word. So professional experience, in my case, I don't cap the entire word, just the first letter of each word. Professional experience, which financial institution I was with, the city, and how long I was with them, right? And so since I started financial services in 1994 and transitioned to Wells Fargo in 2006, the last job I had was from 2006 to 2022, roughly 18 years. And then I start with chronologically my last role. And as a lending manager, I give a summary of what I did and then bullet points. This is where people...
So the order is most recent.
You got it. Most recent. This is where people, and most of us, get out of control. We put 8 to 10 bullet points. Too extensive. It's too much. 5 good. 5 is good. No more than 6. And so the way it's defined here and what I want to also highlight here as I talk to you about the summary and then the bullet points, marinate on this for a moment. Remember, the starting word should not be used repeatedly, right? And I'll tell you what I mean by that in a moment. So the summary here is effectively directed a team of 17 mortgage consultants that served 50 bank locations in Southern California with a significant focus on loan origination, compliance, risk management, business development, performance monitoring and reporting, customer experience, product and services, product and process improvement, budgeting, resource allocation, training and development, right? That's the summary describing the home lending mortgage manager. Then the next is 3 bullet points. I was in that role for 2 years, no more than that. What you'll see in the next job is more bullet points describing what took place. Now, remember I said the leading word should not be the same. I'm going to give you some options, and you can go to AI, you can go to ChatGPT and pull up leading words to kick off of bullet points. I'm just going to give you 3 bullet points that I used here to words that I kick off a bullet point: developed, oversaw, implemented. right? I don't want to be repetitive in the same words. I don't want to use developed or oversaw or implemented or managed or led too many times. And I'll share with you that the AI system that you're going to grade your resume on will point that out. And you want your bullet points to quantify what your actions led to. So in this case, let's talk about develop mortgage bank sales consultants by conducting structured sales training, which improved application productivity per mortgage consultant by 40%. So what was the action that I took? I trained, it was structured, and it improved application percentages by 40% or productivity by 40%. What people often miss is the quantifiable number. What you did doesn't reflect what was the result. So action, cause, right? What was the effect of the action, right? Here's another one. Implemented weekly call nights for mortgage consultants utilizing their book of business and customer relationship management, resulting in improvement in disposition and a 10% increase in application taken.
Something you did, what you used to do it, and what the result was.
Spot on, my man. Spot on. Right? And so in this case, I have 3 bullet points. I spent 2 years in that role, and then I left the banking industry. Right? And so that is the last job. I was there from 2022 to 2024. The next job is where I spent the majority of my time, 15 years in a senior manager role. And both jobs were vice president jobs. And so in this next job, there's about 4 bullet points. Now, I want to take a step back. When you highlight the company you're with, the city, the role, those should be in bold. People should spot that right away. Say, okay, this is the role. Let's take a look, right? And so the next job, I spent 15 years within that role, and it was a senior manager role within the retail banking industry. And remember I said earlier that the kickoff words should not be the same. So earlier I said effectively directed. Now here's the new word we're using. Guided all aspects of operations, including strategic planning, training, development, budget, staffing, forecasting, and performance management for 22 retail bank locations, 22 direct managers, 320 employees, and over 5.6 billion in funds under management. So shows that I had 22 managers that reported to me directly. I was responsible for a large scope of employees, 320 that rolled up to me. And the net worth of these markets was $5.6 billion, right? So that tells whoever's looking at this, wow, there's a lot of responsibility there. There's a lot of risk that could be involved. And the bullet points will describe how effective I was in that role, right? The bullet points will describe how effective I was in that role. And I'm just going to share the keywords that I used. Reduced, directed, orchestrated, and fostered. Each of those words kicks off a bullet point. Again, reduced, directed, orchestrated, and fostered, right? And so, again, you can use ChatGPT to share with you what words to use when kicking off a bullet point. And quite frankly, you can use ChatGPT to help you provide bullet points for any role you're applying for. But what you want to do is make sure you tailor it to your own language. You can't just cut and paste from ChatGPT, right? Be cognizant of that. So I'll pause there, see, Liam, if you want to inject something or had questions.
No, it's making sense, especially when you're trying to catch someone's eye, having the nice bolded words be different. So, directing versus guiding, so it doesn't look repetitive and things don't all blur together, but they still, they hit the same kind of like sense for people, leadership, guiding, directing, this all makes sense, it all kind of fits the overall thrust that you've got in there, but the different words still make each line pop for people. So that's good to keep in mind. Absolutely. Too, and it's useful as a general writing tip for people too, and I try to point this out to a lot of students, because when you're using the same words in the same paragraph, it stands out. It doesn't work as well.
Right. Right. You have to be innovative. And this is a
Right.
one-page resume, Liam, and I have a two-page resume too, because prior to having a professional look at this, I had a two-page resume, and I'll share the difference also. I think that'll stick out with folks. And then
It's good
after.
to know as well. I mean, I have multiple versions as well, but mine are a 2-page and a 4-page. So they're because there's a lot more information that they can ask on there that isn't going to be relevant. So yeah, having multiple versions, you know, because some places actually will have um, a kind of hard requirement.
Yep.
They'll tell you, you know, we'll only take a 1 page or something. It's good to know or have that. Or some people want more information. So
Absolutely, absolutely. And then remember, I shared with you the last, actually went back to 2007, the two roles that I had, but I've been in banking 30. I was in banking for 30 years, and so the next section is going to be additional experience, right? Additional experience. So the next section shows that I was a branch manager with a bank, and then with the starting institution, I worked as a teller all the way to manager. It has my military experience. It has the fact that I volunteer as a career advisor, and then it has my experience as a volunteer within an organization as an employee resource network president, or ERG, employee resource group. And so it has those listed, and that's roughly 5 bullet points, right? And finally, the last piece, I used to, when I was first putting resumes together, I used to have the education on top, and now uh, the rule of thumb is to have it at the bottom. And what you want to do here, depending on the type of degree you have, you want to spell it out, and then you could put it in parentheses. Uh, you can put the initials of it in parentheses. So, Master of Business and Administration, in parentheses, an MBA, and where you got it from, right? Bachelor of Arts in Speech Communication, and where you got it from. Now, you can put the dates you graduated. It's up to you. You don't have to do that. It's not mandatory. I think for those that may have gone to school at one period in time, and then let's say 20 years later you went back and got your graduate degree. You did it in 2023. What you show those looking at your resume is that you're really trying to stay relevant within a certain, and you're continuing your improvement in terms of education. You have the willingness to learn. You have discipline. So you said, hey, I just graduated. I graduated from college, my undergrad, in 1996, but I went back and got my graduate degree in 2022. So I have the discipline and willingness to continue to evolve and learn. That's what the dates demonstrate to those looking at your resume, right? And that is that. And so that is the resume formatting in a nutshell. Now, I also shared with you earlier, before I get to that, I'm going to share with you the format and then also where you can have it graded. But Liam, did you want to add something to that?
Uh, no, so this is like the basic format, the basic things people are looking for. Yeah, it's again, there are interesting similarities and differences. So
Hmm.
for a CV, you don't spend time talking about the specific skills, but you can integrate those into the discussion, the work experience. So and
Hmm.
you also use the reverse chronology, so your most recent, and then you put, okay, here's this academic posting, and these are the things that I did there. And that is somewhat skill based, but it's more a matter of like, I don't know, did you have a leadership position within the department? Did you mentor students outside of the classes? What kind of classes did you teach? Is the kind
Hmm.
of thing that they're looking for there. And after that, the most important thing that you get into then is your educational experience then. So
Yeah.
where did you go? What did you focus on? What were your theses or dissertation on? So it establishes a kind of like expertise, which is similar to like the skills thing, but it generally comes after you've talked about the work experience first. But
Yep.
they're both relevant. So yeah,
Absolutely. And I think,
they're similar, but there's some interesting subtle differences.
yeah, the transition from the resume to the interview process, because I think what you mentioned is, when you get part of the transition to the interview means that at some point, not only do you talk about the bullet points, but you get really granular at,
Mhm.
so how did you get there? What other
Right.
things were you involved in that
Hmm.
that make you qualified for this next job, right? Those are the
Exactly. And
things
that
that
puts
people
you
need to
on.
understand.
They'd have people. They could ask questions about. your areas of research. You listed, oh, so you studied this and you wrote on this. So like, tell me what got you interested in that. And you have to be able to like just dive into that kind of conversation, So
Right. Absolutely.
when you put something on these documents, be prepared to talk about them and expand upon what they said.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think what's like, for example, I highlighted the experiences with 2 roles, right? What I didn't highlight is the experience with the volunteer role as the president of the Employee Resource Network group at the enterprise level. I need to be, like you said, I have to be prepared to talk about that, because not only did I have a full-time job, I also volunteered for the Enterprise Employee Resource Network group as the president, that required collaboration with 12 mid to senior leaders across the footprint and about 4,800 employees across the footprint. And so, these folks don't report to me directly. So how was I able to influence folks indirectly to accomplish the objectives within that role?
Yeah.
If you can do that with indirect reports, imagine what you could do with direct reports. That is a skill that most people.
Yeah, that's very similar to where we would put in things about the different extracurricular places. I volunteered at this, like, I worked with people in this writing center or this or that. What have you done to actually help? Because it's not the direct job experience, but it shows that you're willing to go above and beyond, and how and what kind of skills that you might have that are relevant to them from there.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, I want to share with everyone the resource you can use to have your resume graded. And what I love about this next resource, it breaks the resume down for you in sections. ResumeGo.net. Everyone write this down if you're listening. ResumeGo.net. It's a free service to just have your resume graded. Very user friendly. You get into the site. It has a resume checker. You scan your resume and it'll grade it for you into sections. And so what's beautiful about getting your resume graded, it'll break it down into the following sections for you. So I'm going to go through those sections, which I think will be really helpful. When you log into the website, it'll have Resume Go, Resume Writers, how it works, research, and then Resume Checker. You want to click on the hyperlink that says Resume Checker. And also, if you wanted them to write your resume, they can do that for you at a cost. But this particular tool, check your resume, is no charge to those having their resume reviewed. And I'd like to break it down for you. Now, you get graded on this based on the sections. You can get graded anywhere from an F to an A, and it breaks it down into the following sections. The document synopsis, and the format that I was going to share with you is called the ATS format, right? That's the first bullet point this tool shares with you. It says, okay, you're ATS compliant. Great. File type, it could be a PDF or a Word. Gives you a green check mark. File size, looks good. Page count, whether it's 1 page or 2 pages. If you're 2 pages, great job. Anything beyond that, it'll recommend that you reduce it to 2. Word count, which is pretty cool. It tells you how many words, right? And it tells you whether it's a great job or you need to work on it, right? That is your document synopsis. And then you get into data identification. Again, this is resumego.net. Data identification includes phone number, email address, LinkedIn URL, education, work history, skills and achievements, and data formatting. And again, it'll give you things like, hey, fantastic, or awesome job, a great job. Oh, you need to work on this, right? That is your data identification. Remember, we talked about that at the top of the resume. You have to have your phone number, email, LinkedIn URL. All right. Then you go to the lexical analysis. Now we're talking about how you've written this. Personal pronouns, right? Numeric data, right? Did you qualify your information? Vocabulary level on a scale of 1 to 10, and then reading level, right? It'll tell you whether it's magnificent, good stuff, or hey, you need to work on this. And if you need to work on this, it'll give you a red mark. And then common words. Remember, Liam, we talked about common words, whether they're the kick off the bullet point or they're common words injected into the bullet point. So I have 4 common words But
on words too, just as a general point, because it is important to differentiate, to use this different words, but this is relevant way outside of academia. It's not just relevant what I do. People have I refer to it as theseritis, like they have this disease, you know. When people like pull a word out and they try to find like a synonym or something. If you're just using an online thesaurus and slipping in words, don't trust them. Don't trust a thesaurus. Always look up the word itself, because they have subtle variations in meaning. So it's good to pick different words, but you don't want one that isn't actually appropriate, because it will affect how people understand your reading level and competence. So if somebody sees, oh, Jamal has clearly used this word incorrectly, you know, how well does he really know this? So yeah, it's useful to like, think about these different words, but also do look them up if you're not sure.
Yep, absolutely. No, great call out. You can't just arbitrarily choose a word and think that it's going to mean what you're intending for it to mean.
Yeah, the thesaurus is not that useful.
Right. And then this next section is semantic analysis. So it'll walk through measurable achievements. Remember earlier we talked about in your bullet points, there should be quantifiable numbers, right? What your action was and what did it result from, what resulted from it. And so it'll tell you whether it's good, fair, excellent, superb, magnificent. So be aware of that. Your quantifiable information. Hey, I did X, Y, Z, and it resulted in this. And I shared that in a couple of bullet points. So measurable achievements. If you have enough measurable achievements, you get a green check mark. If you don't, it'll give you an X. And then soft skills. This is where you're not going to see a 50-50 split in most cases. If you do, fantastic. If you don't be discouraged. Soft skills, we talked about that. Things like planning, presentation skills, strategic planning, collaboration. Those are all soft skills. Using things like Microsoft Teams, Excel, PowerPoint, Salesforce, those are all hard skills, right? If you're a technical writer, that's a hard skill. Mm-hmm. And then it'll give you the skills efficiency ratio. This is where I said it might not be a 50-50 split. It could impact your grade, right? It could take it from an A to a B. Don't try to force hard skills if you don't have them. That's okay. This is not about saying, all right, I'm a 50-50 split on hard skills. If you have everything else above the hard and soft skills that are green, and it's graded you, let's say, a B, and because you don't have the split of hard skills, you're not an A, don't be discouraged. You've done a nice job of putting your resume together. All right. Mm-hmm. So I want to make sure, again, this is resumego.net. It's a free service. If you wanted a paid service, then you can use that tool to help you write a resume. What's beautiful about this service, those of you that are listening, you can even upload your resume. So when you go to resumego.net, if you go to the resume checker, right, that hyperlink, you can use a sample. They'll give you a sample resume, right? So let's say instead of scanning your resume, say use a sample resume, and what it will do is take your information, upload it, and then break out various types of formats for you, right? And that's what that will do if you use a sample resume. It'll take your information, upload it, and develop a resume format that's different than what you have. So you can use that tool to look at a different format. If you choose the sample resume they provide you with your information, then you'd have to purchase it. And they do some great sample resumes. It's cheaper than having someone to write a resume for you. Sometimes the writing of a resume can cost you anywhere from $99 to a few $100s. If you write a cover letter, it could go up to $1,000 depending on who's writing it for you. It can get pretty expensive. And so that's your resume, one pager, right? One pager resume. And if you're worried about having a 2-page resume, we'll get to that in a moment.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, this is where again the difference really stands out to me, because my 4-pager is still, that's just moderate. I mean, a CV can be up to 20 pages, so they're a very different animal in that way.
Absolutely,
But
absolutely.
yeah, at the beginning level, in terms of all the basics that go in there, there's actually a lot of similarities, and much more than I thought. So it's actually been quite interesting to see, what you put in what order and whatnot. So yeah,
Very cool. Awesome. So I have a resume that's a 2-page. The one difference here, actually a few differences, and my value proposition. And so I share with you my summary, but prior to that, I tell you what my value proposition, and that's one sentence, right? No more than that, right? What I bring to the table, why people should hire me, my value proposition, right? It's not quantifiable. It just tells you a little bit about who I am. The summary is that, and then the quantifiable information. The other difference,
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I caught that value proposition. What is this? Is this saying like what value you would bring to the organization?
You got it. You got it. Yeah. So I'll give you an example. As a seasoned financial services leader with extensive experience in leading high performing teams, I excel in driving strategic growth, optimizing operational efficiency, and navigating complex regulatory landscapes to deliver outstanding value to all stakeholders and clients alike. That is the value proposition. Okay. And then I have the career summary that now quantifies all those things I said above that, right? And you can include that. You don't have to. I just do it. I've learned to have 2 different formatted resumes, because this one has the value proposition and my career highlights. And so over the years, what are my career highlights that a recruiter can look at and say, all right, before I get to the professional experience, what are some career highlights? Now I can embed this in the bullet points. I chose a different route just to try it. And so some career highlights involved some skills. And I won't give you the bullet points behind each skill, but I'll give you what those skills are for me. And again, not everyone needs to have this. So strategic growth initiatives, risk management, digital transformation, team leadership and development, regulatory compliance and governance, client relationship management, membership growth, and community engagement. Community engagement for me is there because I've been on various boards within the community during my career in financial services. So that tells people not only can I work within an organization, I can also engage in community, give back my time, right, help develop financial literacy, do continued education, have some influence on change. So the community engagement aspect is what's highlighted for me, and then everything else is pretty much the same.
Yeah. All those kind of extracurriculars say a lot about somebody's character too, to the person reading this, that it tells you something about who this person really is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so that's the 2 resumes I have for financial services. And I have 2 others for health and fitness and the entertainment industry. And so, because I've emceed weddings, we have this podcast, I've done commercials, all that is included in my entertainment resume. And then my health and fitness resume is based on, the weightlifting, the mixed martial arts. So those are 2 separate resumes that if I'm looking to do privates, or if I'm looking to get into a commercial, I upload that resume into my reel or my profile. And so not everyone's going to have that many different resumes, but you never know, right? There's a lot of folks out there to do so many different things.
Useful, though, because a lot of people think they have to squeeze everything together, and talk about stuff all at once. I mean, if I'm applying for a position today, I don't need to talk about the fact that I had a Class A driving license, because it's not relevant. I don't need to talk about unloading container ships. It's not relevant.
Right.
And some people really do have you pick up the wrong kind of advice. You think, oh, you have to list all your job experience. So it's nice that you also said, like, start with, like, the last 10 years, whatever, like you're going through a specific period, but also what is relevant to the position, because people will mentally weed you out if they see a bunch of stuff that's totally irrelevant. If their eye just falls on the wrong line, whoops,
absolutely,
tossed.
Yeah, and look, you've got, remember when you're looking at job, you have the required qualifications and the preferred.
Mhm.
Required qualifications are going to be anywhere from 8 to 10. If you're missing one, don't be discouraged. If you've got the other set of qualifications and your resume mirrors those qualifications, by all means, apply for the job. But I'm not going to go apply for technology if I don't have IT experience. I mean, simple as that, right?
Here's an interesting one, and it gets back to a question I wanted to ask about cover letters, though, too,
Hmm.
because for these, when you see the position and it lists here are our required and our recommended, or like our our preferred qualifications, our required and our preferred qualifications.
Yep.
Those are things that you want to have for a resume, different versions of a resume that incorporate those directly and not put those separately in a cover letter.
Yeah, you want to have some of those that match. Yes, you don't always have to have them separate in a cover letter. Your cover letter often indicates my experience, your soft skills, right? It's not your hard skills, and there's no quantifiable information in your cover
Hmm,
letter.
interesting.
And
Okay.
so if I share with you a cover letter, which I update regularly based on the job because you have to have it. So here's something that I constantly revise just to make sure that it aligns with what I'm looking for. So, as an accomplished and seasoned leader, I'd be honored to demonstrate how my experience can contribute to this company, the team, and all stakeholders. You'll find my qualifications, achievements, and personal strength align with the company's goals, vision, and mission. I bring a comprehensive set of skills that I believe will be valuable to company A, B, and C. In the various leadership roles, I've honed my skills in communication, relationship building, customer satisfaction, team building, and networking, supplying a firm foundation for the role. My communication, people centric nature, and compassion afforded me excellent relationship and collaborative skills. I'd be honored and humbled to contribute my talents and experience by working with all stakeholders. As a champion of diversity, equity, and inclusion, my commitment to serving diverse communities and employees is stronger than ever. My military experience provided a rigorous focus on attention to detail, leadership, and commitment to excellence. Please review my enclosed resume for a more in-depth illustration of my professional experience, education, and accomplishments. Thank you for your time and consideration of my candidacy. With gratitude, then my name.
Fascinating. Yeah. Those do get very different then. Okay, yeah. So the hard details directly relevant to the job you're applying for should be edited into a version of the resume itself, where the cover letter is an introduction to, I guess, you as a human being. Like you're not talking about the specifics, but you're saying, hi, I have a lot of leadership experience. You're saying a few things about yourself to kind of stand out and pique their interest to read the resume.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
cool.
And,
Yeah.
and, and I think it's important to underscore when you're looking at jobs and you feel like you have all these qualifications and your resume matches that. And if you don't get a call back, don't be discouraged. Remember the number of candidates that apply for these jobs,
Oh, yeah.
right? It's like if you're in the entertainment industry and you're auditioning for a role because you're not one of those A actors that's just going to get a call and say, "Hey, we want you for the script. Here you go." They're looking for a specific individual, and oftentimes they're looking for plug and play, right? Plug and play, and they'll post it internally and externally. The truth of the matter is sometimes companies have someone in mind already, but for compliance purposes, they have to post the
Right.
jobs
They have
internally
to.
and externally,
Yep.
right? And if there's 100 candidates, as I said earlier, that I've posted for this job, and the top 10 meet a lot of those qualifications, those 90 are going to be pushed out, right?
Yep.
So I'll give you an example what I mean by that. Let's say there's a senior manager role, and there's three of us, Liam, myself, and one other person. Liam and I have senior manager experience. We have the same level of education. The third person has the same level of education, but doesn't have the same management skills. That person is going to be pushed out because if I don't push that person out and there's a fourth and fifth person and I include them in the interview process, that third person, guess what I have to do to the fourth and fifth person? I have to include them in the interview process. As a hiring manager, I want to limit the number of candidates I have to meet with because any
Right.
candidate you're meeting with is 45 minutes to an hour. So
Mhm.
if you get pushed out because you are part of that 10 percentile that doesn't have the necessary experience. That happens. So don't be discouraged by it. Applying for jobs is a numbers game. I don't care if you've applied for 250 jobs in the year and you haven't gotten one pre-screen. That could be a normal part of the process. And if you've applied for 10 jobs and got 4 interviews, hey, good for you, right? Be grateful for it. If you didn't get the job, the fact that you interviewed for it is awesome. What I would say to you is make a positive impression with the recruiter and the hiring manager. Because what if there's another opportunity that opens up and they say, you know, I interviewed Liam a couple of months ago, didn't necessarily meet this job requirement, but there's another role that I think he'd be great for, right? So let's bring him, let's see if he's interested. So can you reach out to him via LinkedIn and say, hey, I got these couple of jobs. Would you be interested in looking at the posting and applying for them? And it's up to Liam at this point to say, yeah, I'd love to. Let's go. Because Liam made a positive first impression. It's amazing. I've interviewed a lot of folks in my career. And it's amazing how many people come ill-prepared to a job interview, right? Ill-prepared because they don't know how to respond to behavioral questions. They don't leave a positive first impression. They don't dress appropriately. And I'm like, all right, I'm not going to interview this person. I'm done with them. And usually interviews like that will last maybe 30 minutes. Funny story, Liam. A colleague and I were interviewing someone. No joke on this for a very important role that dealt with affluent clients and managing people's money. And so we're interviewing this person virtually, and it was interesting. He put us on pause for a moment. I couldn't hear what was going on. Then all of a sudden his phone came off mute. And he goes, can I get ketchup with that? As he's interviewing, I go, excuse me, are you ordering lunch right now? He goes, I'm so sorry, I haven't had lunch. I'm like, okay, look, man, I get it. You haven't had lunch. You could have rescheduled the interview, but if you really cared about this job, you wouldn't be ordering food through the drive-thru. He was at Mickey D's ordering lunch, and he wanted ketchup with that, and we heard him. So I dropped the interview right away. And so just make sure once you get past because to get past the resume review in today's environment is a huge step.
Yeah.
So don't take that for granted. Don't take that for granted. I've had some interesting interviews in the past. People interviewing while they were in Palm Springs, having a couple of drinks. And I'm like, where are you? He's like, oh, I'm in Palm Springs walking the streets. I'm like, oh, thanks for being honest. Again, important to leave a positive first impression because you never know when they want you for that next opportunity, right?
Now, is this something that you guys can do more broadly in the business world with resumes? See, when I'm getting to an interview stage, right? So you've made it through the initial reviews. They're like, okay, you're one of the candidates. You're one of the people we want to talk to. So you come in. I found it's very useful to look up the people who are on that hiring committee and see something about them because it can affect what you'd want to pitch. So one thing that I have to do in interviews is they'll ask you to give a short demonstration of your teaching style. Like how would you do something? So give us like a 10-minute spiel on something, right? And the way that you'd want to do that or the topics or anything else, you might want to pay some attention to who's in the room and what their style is or whatever. So because it can affect how you're perceived. You know, it doesn't matter if, this, this works or whatever, but if it's not going to work for the person in the room,
Right,
so
right.
Would recommend when people are preparing for the interview, is it possible to prepare in the same way where you look into the people?
I think it's important to understand your audience first and foremost. I don't think it's important to know, at least in my industry, to know about the individual versus how you can contribute to their line of business.
Right. So it's more like general preparations. So it'd be easier in that sense because it's like general preparation stuff, certain tips and tricks to follow, and then things that are specific to the particular field that you're
absolutely. So,
okay,
so an example of that could be that you've got you're on a panel interview and you've got someone in risk management, someone in compliance, and someone in the hiring manager. something you want to keep in mind at the end, and this is kind of getting to the end of the interview, is how are you as the interviewee going to contribute to that line of business? You know, that's a question you can ask at the end. Like, so now that we've concluded the interview, what's the most important thing about my role and how it can contribute to your line of business, right? And so what I always tell people, once you get past the pre-screen and you get to the interview, it's perfectly fine to bring a notebook with you and say, would you mind if I reference my notebook as we go through these behavioral questions? Because I have some examples that I'm sure will relate to the questions that you ask. So write down things that you've done that may help you respond to the questions. And if you need to pause for a moment and write down the questions so that it resonates, feel free to say that. Hey, I'm gonna just write down the notes. Are you okay with that? I love when people come prepared and have a notebook. They're writing things down. They take their time in responding. They're very specific. On the flip side of that, just keep in mind also, people that interview well don't mean they're going to do the job necessarily well, right? And so keep that in mind. I think that happens quite a bit. But when you're prepared and you are you're forthcoming with what you're trying to do, folks tend to be more open to that. And one thing during an interview, if you're asked probing questions, some probing questions are good because they just want you to elaborate a little more. But if you're asked repetitive questions that are similar in nature to probe, you're off a little bit. Just recognize that you're not responding to the way they want you to respond. Because as in a corporate environment, you're asked behavioral questions to illustrate how well you could respond in the STAR format, situation, what the task was, what the action was, and what resulted from it. And if you're digressing completely, and they're asking you probing questions can you tell me a little more about that? Recognize that you're off in your response. And if someone asks you a probing questions and your response, well, I've already answered that, you've already started off on the wrong foot. I've had someone tell me that, didn't I just answer that for you? I'm like, no, that's why I'm asking you probing questions. And so be aware of that. And again, we're getting past the resume part, but it's perfectly, my point in sharing that is be prepared to elaborate as much as you can, and then have one or two questions at the end prepared, right? It doesn't have to be like you got a boatload of questions to ask, because be mindful of their time, right? You want to be aware of how much time you have with your interviewer. And then the time where you want to boast is at the beginning. So tell us about yourself, Liam. Share with me your experience. And I remember you and I talk about this because you have a hard time credentializing yourself quite a bit, right? A lot of people do. It's not just you.
I can't sell myself worth a darn.
None of us, not a lot of people can do that. But that is your time to boast, because it tells people you're confident in your abilities, you bring value to the team, because they want to differentiate you from other candidates. What is Liam bringing to the table, right? Then you get into the behavior questions, and a lot of these interviews nowadays are virtual. So there's nothing wrong with, if you have a pre-screen with a recruiter, it's not, you're not on camera. There's nothing wrong if you're somewhere in a room where you could post things on Word in bullet points, so you can. I've done that before. Okay, let me see. They're going to ask me
about my document behind the browser window with the.
Yes. Who cares? I mean, you gotta do it to give you the best shot at getting the job, right?
Yeah.
And then after that, you ask a couple of questions. I always like asking, for me at least, are there any questions that you asked me today that I was not clear in explaining, and can I collaborate on those, and can I elaborate on those more for you now? Some interviewers will say, you know what, here's a question that I was unclear about. Others will say, no, you're good. You're good. And if your interview is scheduled for an hour and it only lasts 30 minutes, you went too fast. You might not get the job. I'm just saying, hey, right? You might not get the job. And so that's it in a nutshell, man. What else can we talk about, you think, around resumes?
Well, you do like to try and keep these to an hour, which I think we've hit. So I don't want to push much beyond it, but I think we've hit everything from the basic structure of a resume, what needs to go into it, as well as how a cover letter is different and how it introduces you as a human being. All those soft skills that you bring in as well to, because we're not all just a bunch of statistics and work experience. We're human beings too. And people want to know what they're getting. And then all the way up to at the end, we've already thrown in some interesting interviewing tips based upon that, because you do have to be able to riff on what you've put into your resume, be able to expound upon it. So I think that we've hit the main parts about this, but I think that we could talk much more about on another one based upon your experience, how people could do better interviews, how you could better prepare for them in advance, what you can do to rehearse for things, to do it right, because some of us don't do those very well. Maybe we can do an episode on that if people enjoy this, that goes into that kind of skill as well.
Absolutely. It's an important part of the interview process, because what we talked about, we don't like talking about ourselves. That is the most difficult part. But when you get into the interview process, it's a must. And that's the time that you need to do that. And so, yeah, I'd love to do, an episode about interviewing tips and techniques in the future. And I hope everybody enjoyed Office Hours with JL today. Yeah. And we're at 1 hour and 6, which is exactly what needs to happen to keep my attention.
Right. We're going to try and keep these relatively pithy, because I can ramble on and on. And with a lot of them, the nice thing is we can see what the engagement is, who's interested in something. We can do different follow-ups and build on different topics and go forward as we're bouncing around through topic to topic. So yeah, if this is helpful here, then let's pick Jamal's brain in future on some more preparation for jobs.
Pick my brain and put questions. I know Liam publishes it to YouTube. I saw a lot of comments in the last episode. Appreciate that. And Liam and I do our best to respond to those. I responded to every one that I've seen so far. So put questions in the comments as well. Let us know what you think, and I'll do my best to respond as I know Liam will. And we hope you appreciated this episode, and we appreciate your support and your viewership. Share it with your friends. We're trying to create a platform that's educational, that's useful to the larger group. And I appreciate Liam's time, and I'll turn it to Liam to close this out if you want to close this out, sir.
Yeah, this I think, again, I hope has been educational and helpful for people. We are going to be going through some very diverse topics. So I don't know if you guys can hear that. It's all good. This is always like a garage sale weekend up here on the mountains. So normally there's a motorcycle traffic, but today there's cars constantly going to houses. But yeah, we'll go through tons of different topics. So you're going to get a wide range of different issues that can come up here, and how can we help you? That's the key. With something like this, we want to be able to draw on our diverse experience and then actually help you out. So again, if you've got questions, thoughts, whatnot, jump in there. As we build up here, we're also trying to build a little Discord community where people can talk about and do like little recaps after, the different episodes, ask questions, provide follow-ups, suggest topics for future. So if you're interested as well, send a message to us. We can send you the links into that. But again, this is Office Hours with JL. We're in video. If you want to see my ugly mug and Jamal flexing, then you got to watch the video on YouTube. But we're also in audio on like Amazon and Apple and Spotify and iHeartRadio, all these different ones here. So however you prefer to consume your content, you'll find us.
Have a great one, everybody. Happy Memorial Day. We'll chat with you later. Wait till we get into MMA. That's going to be a fun space.
Happy Memorial Day weekend.
Take care, Liam. Bye, everyone.